Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This is the first Fight Chat Friday of 2021, a whole new year and a whole new content for us to dig into as the year goes on. So TKD Coach Academy bring you every Friday a little bit of an insight into ITF Taekwondo Sparring, competition, performance, coaching, and if that sounds like a conversation you'd be interested in getting involved in, then make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit that bell button to get notifications every Friday when we go live. Richie, you might just explain to everyone why we decided to go live this Friday, given that it's the 1st of January, New Year's Day, and the whole lot of it. I don't know that we were either of us expecting to come on today, but we decided it was worth a go.
Yeah, well, basically, just over the Christmas period, people will be sending in some messages and things like that. So we kind of had a bit of a tradition on Instagram that when we hit a bit of a milestone, we would do a Q&A and take some questions from people. So we hit the 3,000 subscribers mark on YouTube over the Christmas period. So thanks to everybody for hitting that subscribe button.
Fantastic.
So if you haven't done already, now is a great opportunity to do so. So get down there, hit that subscribe button and get involved. So we put it out there on plenty of social media channels that we have across Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube posts as well. So we got in lots of questions because I think for a lot of people it's a good time of the year to kind of reset, reevaluate what's gone on. Obviously 2020 wasn't the best year for a lot of people, but it's a good opportunity to reset, get some questions in. What do people want to work on for the future, and maybe to help some people going forward. So I think it's a great way to almost put a full stop on 2020 and to help a lot of people to go forward into the new year.
Yeah, for sure. And we did get quite a few questions, and we won't be able to answer all of them in the longer form. So most of them got a short form answer on the platform they were submitted on. But we have a few of them that we want to kind of dig into a little bit and make a little bit of content around today. So we jump straight into those?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, here we go. So our very first one from Manish Lavania 6114. I'm butchering that, I'm sure. But the question is, how do I keep my kicking leg in the air? So we're definitely talking about something by way of a leg strength or a practical application of leg strength kind of question.
Like, of course, like leg strength is a massive part in our sport in particular, both in terms of sparring and in patterns. And you need to have a good kicking ability to be able to excel in both of those, and being able to hold your leg is a great sign of control. So we actually had Dan Van Zandt from Flexibility Research. We had an interview with him back over the summer during the first lockdown.
Yeah, it seems so long ago.
Yeah, seems so long right now, but he was mentioning the whole idea of if you can do things slow and you have a great control over your kicking ability. And that's very important here. So like being able to do things slow, I think, is a good way to develop that strength and control. So what we're talking about here really is isometric holds. So basically using gravity as the force. So like when we go to the gym, obviously the external force is usually a weight, but we often forget that like gravity itself is one of the most like forceful things that we have, and we can use that to our advantage as well. So by literally using the wall, holding your leg, and just progressively overloading that in terms of time or with resistance or whatever, you can start to develop that control. And that, we'll actually touch on that later, but it's very, very important as well in building high kicks and flexibility as well. So it all couples together quite nicely. But yeah, just to simply answer that question, I would look at starting with the wall and try to just hold the leg using gravity as a force and fight against that. Get to that resistance point and just try to push on bit by bit. And I think that's a good way to start and to build that leg control. We have lots of ideas. We have videos on our channel, 50 creative ways to build flexibility, leg control, strength, etc. So I will pin that video in the top. So that might be worth checking out as well. So there's lots of ideas there of creative ways, almost to like you always mention this, Adrian, of many ways to literally get the reps in of the kicking. Without people actually recognizing
disguising the reps.
Exactly, disguising it. Yeah,
that's it. And I mean, I think that is a huge part of it, because it can be quite like when your body knows the work that's ahead and can already quantify it. you start to hedge it and shave the percentages off it. And, you know, you see this with students who, like, if you're going for 10, they'll stop at 9. You know, if they're going for 15, they'll have a good look at you at 12 or 13 and see if you look the other way, you know. So it's not laziness either, you know, it is, but it's not exclusively that. I mean, it takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline to go that extra bit. But if you're not really conscious of how much work it's going to take, what the effort is going to be, because it's part of a game, an activity, a challenge, you know, then you can hide a lot of that work, hide some of the, like, not let your body know it's going to be suffering. And then you go 100%. That little bit further. Yeah, I think that's really important. I was only
speaking to somebody about this yesterday, actually, about the fact that we're in lockdown again in Ireland, and the fact that we're coming back to training at home, and it's just like getting a routine or getting something new that just like sparks a little bit of enthusiasm is very important, and just having something new and just that refreshing approach is so important, because if you just kind of do the same thing, it becomes a little bit stagnant, and then you kind of lose that accountability and you begin to kind of fall off the wagon a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, big thank you for that question. Let's have a look at the next one along. So what should you do when you get stunned? And again, this is one that the context isn't really there in the question, but we kind of read into it a few different ways. And the first one was let's deal with it from the most extreme point of view of you've had your bell rung in a competitive match, in a competition. You know, so basically, what happens at that point if you're the competitor? And I think the first thing you've got to go with is, look, the ITF is we're talking about a semi-contact sport. We're not talking about a full contact sport. So the rules are there to look after your safety, and the very first thing that'll happen if you've had a bad knock to the head is, if the referee hasn't stopped the match, you or your coach will probably stop the match, and then you have the opportunity to have a medical evaluation and call in the doctor. And that's something that you can do, and that, you know, if it's a bad one, is something you probably should do. None of us want to end a match, you know, under those circumstances, and there's the whole like follow-on ramifications of that. But none of us want to end the match there. However, we all know how dangerous a head injury, a head trauma, like a concussion potentially, or any acquired brain injury can be. So that's kind of the first step that we have in ITF. But let's maybe back it down a little bit, and you've just got a smack and you're a little bit, you don't know if it's going to be bad yet. You know, you've been dazed. What are the first steps that you can take? So, like for me, you're jumping off from the fact that, okay, this can be a practiced event, not the getting hit in the head part of it, but the what to do when you're overwhelmed by the situation. And in ITF, you can always take a step out. So you could step out of the ring, and that buys you a few seconds to take a breath, feel what's going on in your body, feel what's going on in your head, let that go if possible, and come back into the match fresh. It's not something that you really want to do, but you can call time. You know, if you need to take a break, you can call time, you can get the doctor. But of course, the risk is, if you call the doctor after getting punched in the head, the chances are they'll go, well, this might be just too risky, you're out of that match. But it's important that you take a moment to just assess the situation, think about, what do I do next, or what is next, and then get yourself back in there with a plan and a positive mindset. And again, that's assuming you're just rattled. Now, you were thinking, Richie, as well, what if this is just training?
Yeah. So, like, there's a lot of time questions are not coming from people who are high-level competitors, and there's just people who are colourable starting off their journey and training in the club. Obviously, there's not a lot of people doing contact and sparring at the moment, but the question is still very much relevant. So what happens if you do get stunned in training? So for me, it's very important that you have that environment, that you have training partners who are there to help you to get better, not there to go in and smash you to make it an uncomfortable and a negative experience. So first off, you need to be sure that is the culture, and that is the way things go in the environment that you're in. But just coming at it like a step back, just like maybe before you get stunned, maybe like think of ways to maybe defend yourself a little bit better. So maybe looking to improve your movement, your avoiding, maybe your distance management. How can you keep somebody back? So using your legs to greater effect. Usually when we get stunned, it's somebody takes a real heavy hit. So a lot of times it will be usually punches, or maybe just following on from punches where somebody gets a kick after that sequence. Exactly. So it's just being able to recognize that and expand the distance a little bit if you're not comfortable in that closer range, and to be aware of your head positioning as well. I think that's very, very important. A lot of time, people lean and they like duck to the side and things like that, and that can be a problem. You got to be very careful there. So yeah, it's just there's a couple of ways you can look at that question. Again, as we always say, context is key, but hopefully there's some value there for people they can take from that question.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so let's have a look. All right, we have one item there. So what's the best way to sneak in an axe kick? And I know we pulled out a little bit of video for this one, but just to kind of look at that question, as it stands, you'd like to think you don't need to sneak in the axe kick, that it's just like any other shot, there's a right time and a right place for it. But any thoughts on that before? Go on.
Actually, was it our very last episode that you mentioned that the back leg axe kick is something that is rarely countered directly? Was that, we mentioned that, I think, recently, didn't we?
Yeah, for sure. When we did the video that was kind of focusing on axe kick, for sure, it's like we watched a lot of video putting that one together, and there's very infrequently that anyone even attempts to counter the back leg axe kick, as long as
I think it was Lindsay was
against
Adelina maybe, yeah, and we pulled that idea out,
But it's definitely a thing. And like as we look at the little video clip, we're seeing like a huge range of them. Be they the front leg, quite direct ones, the hacks version, some of the classical back leg ones from Patrick and Pierre Granette there. Back leg and front leg from Katja. That's a Zach Espy special. There's a lot of ways that this shot can be thrown, but the one thing you'll see from everybody who throws it, it's not a half-hearted shot. There's conviction to get to the end of the shot there, and I think that's I think one of the key things with an axe kick is it has to be something that you do and build into your repertoire. That's a shot that you feel that you can go to, in the same way as your side kick or whatever else. That if it's something that you're hesitant with and that you feel like you're giving it away, it's like when a person doesn't blitz well or they don't go to hands well. Usually there's a hesitation, and the hesitation means the body's not in a preferable position for what they're trying to throw. So if there's a big setup, if there's if the body leans before the axe kick gets thrown, etc., that kind of thing, that takes away from it. So there shouldn't really be a need to sneak it in. It should just be a shot that fits the situation in the match at that point in time. And when it doesn't work, it's because the situation was wrong or the preparation was wrong.
We even seen it there, just as you said, like the clips that we just showed you. There was a nice natural flow to a lot of those. As you said, like it wasn't very forced, or it's just like they're almost coming natural as a part of the sequence or the movement that the fighter is doing naturally. So yeah, like of course there's a couple of shots that it comes nicely off. So like that back leg one is a nice one to go directly with, or to once you get your opponent to move backwards, then that's a nice one to come off with. Of course you have the front leg one, which is a nice direct shot as well that you can almost carry with like a side kick into that front leg one. But
as long as
it comes nicely off hands. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it comes nicely off hands as well, and it comes nicely off turning kicks both before and after. So we might actually touch on that later on as well. But if you can go turning kick to the body, same leg axe, it'll tend to be there a lot of the time, and vice versa. If you go axe and as you drop, the turning kick to the body should be there on that same leg as well. So yeah, there's a couple of ways that it nicely flows together. So I think what you said, Adrian, is very valuable there to find how it like fits your style, and not how you have to really sneak it in, but how it becomes part of your natural movement.
Yeah, definitely, and that should be the case for any technique. I mean, if you really have to contrive too much to make a technique work or fit, then it's not got the efficiency or the efficacy for the situation that you're in. So there's a reason why in any particular snapshot of time sparrers look similar and choose similar techniques. It's because certain things are efficient because of how the game is played at a particular time. So the situation with the act kick is very much the same. If it's efficient, if it's going, if there's a good use for it, it'll be there. We just tend to see that it's not a very widely chosen technique, but maybe even because of that, it's not often countered when it's thrown. So,
True.
you know,
People don't see it that often to
yeah,
maybe get that feel for it. But it's one of those ones as well. I guess like every technique that like you got to get the timing right as well. So if you are looking to counter it, it has to be as it's just about to come to a decent level. Like if it's already up, we say past your
past the
belt,
hip,
like
yeah.
it's not a good time to be there. So you got to get out there and bail out. So that's why we can see it a lot. Actually, once somebody is decent and, as we said, has that natural flow with it, it does become almost a big part of their game.
For sure. Okay, let's see what we got here. From Alan Zalada, asking about warm-up for patterns. So I think it's an interesting one because we have done so much chatting about sparring, and I mean, that is our primary focus. But from the point of view of warming up for patterns, like one of the things that I would say is always to my competitors is you don't go out to do your first pattern as your first pattern. So it shouldn't be the first pattern you do of the day. So I think the focus is always making sure that you get through some number, 2, 3, 4, at least full power patterns before you get out on the floor to deliver your first performance. And that's whether it's a grading, whether it's a tournament, it doesn't matter. But you might need to do a certain amount to prepare the body and prepare the mind to get on the floor and do patterns well. And maybe the first key difference between sparring and patterns is that you probably don't want to be at the same state of arousal. You don't need to be up for it in quite the same way as you do for sparring. So
yeah, because you'll end up actually like wrecking your rhythm and flying through it, which we see a lot of the time with inexperienced people, like maybe color belts in particular. Like they will rush through that pattern and it's almost like a race to the finish line, which ruins any bit of a flow or rhythm that you may have.
Yeah. And I always tend to focus when it comes to the pattern warm up. There's the few things you want to make sure your flexibility is there, your balance is there. You'll kind of give yourself a few testing things. Usually the wall work and will be there as some part of it. I'll usually practice a few of the like trickier sequences from a few patterns just to make sure that the flow is nice through it. And really, the warm up is going to be focused on getting timing and getting rhythm. So as you get up, I think one of the challenges in patterns is that you have a certain maximum power and speed that you're able to deliver with good technical precision. And arriving to that, like as you get warmer, as you get looser, your timing changes and shifts slightly. So I actually think one of the big things is you need to give yourself enough repetitions of movement, even if they're not all in full patterns, but it's just repeating sequences or individual movements, to actually find your rhythm and your timing so that you have that eyes, hand, feet, breath together that we need at the end of each movement, and that you have that rhythm where you're arriving and you're not bouncing out at the end of the movement, or like your weight's not carrying you forward, that you've figured out central gravity, or for each particular stance, and you're feeling it and you're working through it. So I just think in patterns it's a slightly different focus from what you're looking at in sparring. You really want to feel like you're sinking into the mats the right way. You're you're steady on your feet. You're not recoiling or rebounding. That when you hit the end of a kick, you will do that and be able to recover with balance. Those kind of things. And I think your warm up with pattern is like, well, you continue until you get there. Sometimes
and you can recover much quicker as well, of course.
Yeah.
As opposed to like if you belt out a full sparring round, like it's going to take a lot more out of you. Whereas if you get through a couple of high level patterns, even like 80-90% at least, you can recover much quicker. But as well, like of course you want to hit the ground running when you're going to spar, but in terms of patterns, you can't really afford to, as you said, build up to that performance because you're being marked down from the beginning, from the get-go.
Yeah.
Whereas like exactly, so you have a little bit more leeway in terms of sparring. Of course you want to hit the ground running as well, but like there will be people who will almost go in and use their first match as a warm-up, especially people who are really high level and have that confidence in the back pocket to be able to do that. But in patterns you don't have that option really. You need to really hit the ground running.
For sure. And so hopefully that offers some little bit of help or advice on it. But yeah, definitely the key takeaways for me is, get that rhythm and the timing settled to where you feel good about it, and don't let yourself get overexcited before you get in the ring. Not a great place to be. So that was Alan, and thank you for that one, Alan. So how to optimize training between anaerobic exercises, so power, speed, and aerobic, so stamina training. And that is from Jacob Thomas, I think they're from Slovakia. It's a really good question.
For you. It's actually one of those ones that you're very interested in. So I think that you'll have a nice answer for this one.
Yeah, and it kind of leads into some of the reading that we've done as well. We've included a couple of books that kind of head in that direction. But like, I think this comes back to, for me anyway, really wondering why as a kid at 11 or 12 years of age, it was like we spent so much of our extra training time running. And going on long runs, and the answer is always, well, if it's good enough for Muhammad Ali, it's good enough for you, get out, and you go running. And it was like, yeah, but we don't run in in Taekwondo. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, the focus was on developing an aerobic base in theory, and there's a point to that, and the point to that is having a better aerobic base in terms of your ability to recover from bouts of high intensity exercise or activity is beneficial.
I think it might actually be worthwhile if we actually differentiate those as well, because as you mentioned, the whole anaerobic obviously is a bit more like short bursts, and then we have the aerobic a bit more long duration, like the runs and building that higher capacity as well.
Yeah, and so when we think of our Taekwondo sparring, we're talking about usually a 2x2 minute match with a minute in between, where the level of consistent output is intermittent. Okay, so you have bursts of high energy, high intensity activity separated with lower intensity recovery periods in any given bout. Very few matches are high intensity, start to finish, go. And there's a reason for that, which is we can't go high intensity for 4 minutes. It's not a thing that we can do. So what you've basically got is a number of energy systems that provide the energy for all this activity. When you're talking about less than 30 seconds, you're talking about a very, very high level of immediate available energy. And that's, again, keeping it very, very simple, that's coming from an aerobic pathway, an anaerobic pathway. There's no oxygen present in the production of that energy. So we don't have time to kick on the very efficient fuel burning or fuel producing system that the aerobic pathway allows us. So that's for longer duration activities that go beyond certainly the first 2 minutes and carry on from there. And then we have basically one very, very quick and very quickly expiring pathway, and then one that's going to fairly get us through those 2x2 minute rounds. So and they're both anaerobic, so there's not an awful lot of the long, slow distance kind of stuff involved in that. But it's all energy pathways are always in use all the time. So we're always at a blend of them. So if we can more readily dip into one or another, it does help us. The problem then is, how do you train it? So we want to make our training as specific to our event as possible. And so we will use an awful lot of interval training, which will help us build from that aerobic base and build some capacity for that high-end, high-intensity, very demanding, and anaerobic energy usage. So we're going to push that. So that means we need to be doing exercise that's a very, very high intensity, where there is a burst of that high-intensity work and an appropriate recovery. And then we kind of need to tweak the recoveries as well, so that the recoveries become just a little too short to kind of push the threshold there as well.
Yeah, so an example for that really would be for maybe like a combination where you repeat it for maybe 10 seconds, and then you'd have a recovery period of, well, I suppose we could do 10 and 10. That would be an example of one. And then you repeat this. So that's the whole idea of the intervals. And why would you be changing the rest time then?
Okay, so the thing is, if we're looking to actually develop our speed power, we need to fully recover. So we're going to have a rest interval that's at least twice as long as the work interval, but better if it's 3 times or more. Okay, so maybe we work for 10 seconds, rest for 30 plus. So for our, if we're really working on maximal speed or maximal power output, then we're going to have longer and longer rest intervals. And it can be even, it could be, there's no like maximum amount of time. You could rest for 10 minutes and go again. But we want to keep the body fresh, so that we will tend to have like 2 to 3 times the rest interval for the work interval. But then when you need power endurance or speed endurance, you need that to last for a particular period of time. you have to reduce the rest intervals then. So that's where we get to something like the 10 and 10. We end up with something where the rest isn't sufficient to let you completely recover. So you're going to lose some speed and some power, but you're going to be able to preserve that reduced speed and power for longer. So that's kind of what we spend most of our time doing in Taekwondo. So we want to be fast and explosive, but we need to be fast and explosive multiple times over 4 minutes. So that's our goal. And what will help us get back to being fast and explosive again is having a good aerobic base to where we do recover, the heart rate comes back down, we replenish the energy as best we possibly can. And so again, the question is, how do we train it? So interval training is one, like you mentioned there, our explosive repeats, that kind of thing. And then we've got to look at rhythm training would let us get into some of that longer ones where, you have a particular rhythm that you set, the heart rate stays a bit lower and it's continuous steady state stuff. So even if that's like, combinations that just flow, they're not for power, they just flow and you keep it going for balance and recovery. Those are quite nice. And then separate to it, something that you might do like box step ups, like skipping, like rowing, like stationary biking, something like that, where you can keep a low heart rate at a steady state for a longer period of time. That will help you and on a recovery side of things as well. So you could do them on the days that you're not doing your high intensity work. So when you're not doing your explosive training, the next day or the day after you've had a sparring session, you've done 8 or 12 rounds, that's a good day then to do a long recovery session where you do 20 to 30 minutes, of a recovery on a bike or,
and of course that increases your base then as well, your foundation, doesn't it, for everything else to build upon, that more longer, slow, steady stuff.
And then the last thing you'd say about it is, like, if you're going to have a phase that focuses on building that aerobic base to where you're pushing the heart rate up a little bit and you're trying to actually develop the ability to go a little harder over that 20 to 30 minutes and still dwell in that pathway, then pre-season, post-season is a great time for that. You don't want to be doing that all year. Simply because you want to be getting more specific and getting into what we're doing in sparring.
Yeah, you want to be actually getting spars in and
exactly,
and that almost becoming your cardio work based on the work you've already put in the, as you said, the off season.
And you certainly don't want to be developing like repetitive use stuff or joint problems that are based on you spending an awful lot of time doing an activity that you're not accustomed to, that you're not training for. So if you're going to be taking risks with your body, you want to be doing it within your sport more so than on a supplementary training thing.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. Like, the more specific, the better, really, isn't it? Like, as you said, the going running is great for your general fitness.
Yeah.
But when you're looking, because when I think about it, even when you're doing different sports, if you don't do something for a while, you're knackered after maybe like 30 seconds to a minute. For example, I train jiu-jitsu, and that's so different to when you spar in Taekwondo.
Yeah.
You think they're kind of similar energy outputs, but they're so different. And then you're thinking like the muscle endurance as well for gripping and stuff, as opposed to moving and striking and moving again. It's completely different. So you got to actually do what you want to prepare for as well is so important.
Yeah, that principle of specificity again. So we might end up coming back to that in some ways later on, but let's see what we got now. So how do you defend a side kick, which is one half of this question, and then how to counter someone who does traveling side kicks. And again, thanks to our questioners for those. And again, there's a little bit of video for this one, but because this is a common enough question or topic, I think, for us.
Yeah. So like, first off, like, what are the options that you have? So to defend a side kick, like we can see in this video here, you can directly counter it, so go through. Then you can wait for it to drop like we see here and come through. Here we have direct counter again. Of course, you can just avoid it as well. That's a simple way to defend it. You see people block, but ideally we don't want to block because we want to maximize the opportunity to counter ourselves as well if we can. If we block, we're then a second behind, so the advantage that we got is lost. So you just see from the clips that we've just seen here, two great ways to to counter a side kick are to go as it's rising. So we mentioned this earlier on the axe kick. So as the kick, basically as the toe leaves the ground, and that's your moment to go, or as it's dropping down. So if you can get the timing of those correct, they are very good opportunities to counter it. But of course, defending it and countering it are not the same as well at the same time.
Sure. And again, there's a tendency to think of, the side kicks as being, two different techniques. Oh, you're carrying with a side kick, you're shifting with a side kick, or, that they're separate techniques. But in the end, they're just, ways of moving with a particular technique. And the same kind of openings will tend to emerge for the counter. But they do change the rhythm of it. And I think, that's one of the things that you need to be, you need to train with a partner as often as possible, with different partners as often as possible, so that you start to read and perceive those cues and signals. So you start to
see an internal feel, isn't it?
How is the foot coming off the ground? What is the shape it's taking? Is there, can you see the shin and step in against that? Is the heel wide of the hip, so can you go through on the blind side that way? Is the foot carrying lower the knee on the way up, so can I dam that and stop the foot from coming higher? Is it actually more of a turning kick? Is it, is there a step or a preparatory movement? Does the hip roll? All these kind of things give you little clues as to the counter that you should choose. So which is the right counter, or the right approach? And you'll need to watch a couple, usually. It's you don't necessarily want to step in on the first side kick you see. But once you've seen a couple come up, okay, I know what I'm doing with this person.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you said there of being in a live situation where somebody is throwing a variance of side kicks towards you, different rhythms, different ranges, different body types then with different opponents. And the more you can be in that situation, you just get a sense of rhythm, sense of timing, and then that's where your ability to counter really shines in live environments and against real opponents. But it's as you said, it's that internal cue of when to go based on subconscious things. Because you can't think of all those things that you just listed there a second ago. You can't just tick those boxes. The match is over and you're probably going to get hit lots of times. So it really needs to become an internal and a subconscious thing. So you need to put yourself in that situation and to almost do a true experience, get that feel, and it will just become second nature to you then after a while. The moments which are correct and the moments which are not correct to go.
Yeah. And I think the takeaway almost from that is if your exercise looks like, partner A, takes a foot-to-foot step and throws a side kick to the hip of partner B, and you counter with, avoid skip dolio or whatever it happens to be, this probably isn't a great exercise for you to learn how the side kick presents itself. Where if the challenge that's given is, well, you two are sparring, partner A is going to kick partner B in the hip with a side kick, and partner B is going to counter with 1, 2, or 3, whatever, or it could be anything they want, or it could be a specific thing. But you start to read the distances, the rhythms, the preparations. Maybe there's nothing to be learned by what they do with their foot, but you look at how they move their hands or how they lean their head before, and these things you'll start to read over time. And even if you don't think you're reading it or paying attention to it, your brain is doing that for you. It's the more it sees, the more often it sees that, the better it'll solve the problem for you.
Absolutely. And then as well, you think of the whole idea of at the top level, you're going to get so many variants of a side kick. Not nobody, but a lot of people throw it in a different way.
Yeah.
And so you need to be able to have that ability to be flexible in how you approach it and to read different types. Because if you just have one set way of one particular side kick, there's so many variables of a side kick that people have. As you said, stepping, knee position, shin position, all these small details that people do it differently, so they do matter. So you need to the understanding is more important than the what, really.
Sure. Okay, so let's see. So general advice for a parent, I would love you to do a show on this, and this from EJ87. So I think we might take the concept there of maybe actually putting together a little bit of a focus, whether it's the Fight Chat Friday or the Mindset Monday, whichever way we decide to do it. But and again, without too much context, it's hard to answer a specific question there. But the one thing, or the few quick points that I'd give right now for your average parent of a Taekwondo student who's getting started in this whole world, and maybe like most parents, you just want the best for your kids. You want them to enjoy their activity, whether it's a sport or otherwise. And, if the focus here is, well, how do I make sure that my child gets the most out of their participation in Taekwondo? Then the few things I would say, that you can do that are really, really easy to do that will help with that is, number one, stay in regular contact with the club. Drop in, watch a session every now and again, ask questions, and in particular, try to have some idea as to what's going on in the classes all of the time, so that you can actually help and encourage and support home training when that comes up. Now, depending on the age of the child, that might not be a thing at all. That might be a case of doing some stretching before you brush your teeth in the morning and at night. It could be having some exercises that you do at particular times around the day, or parallel with other activities. But knowing kind of what they're involved in and being able to ask and answer some questions around that is really, really good. Showing any interest at all, asking questions. What did you do today? What's that called? That's a word I don't know. Can you show me what that is? Will really, really help with that. The second thing then is when you know who your club is affiliated to and all the rest of it, it's worth keeping an eye on their social media or website as well. So, for example, in Ireland, our clubs are part of the Irish Taekwondo Association, and they're affiliated with the International Taekwondo Federations. But by following the social media sites, you can see, what are the activities that are going on? What can we go to? Because your club won't always take an interest in all activities. It depends on the philosophy of the coach. But if you know what's going on, you can ask questions. And again, being an informed parent is probably the biggest part of it. So I think we'll save most of the rest of this for maybe a detailed episode. We'll pick out a few key points and we'll talk about it. But if you're following along on our Fight Chat Fridays, you're probably a more informed parent than most at this stage anyway. So fair play.
Probably more so than most students.
Yeah. So fair play on that front. But again, first step, be informed, be at the club every now and again, see what's going on there, and definitely, ask some questions of your child, of the coach. The biggest thing that you can do as a parent of any child in sport is take an active interest without, say, overlaying your goals on the child's goals, but like being active and interested, I think is really, really good. Let's have a look for our next question. We actually have that one already. So, how to increase the speed of your punches and kicks. So, this is one again, I think that just kind of comes up on the regular with our, whenever we have one of these question and answer sessions, that one comes up. So, do you want to give a very quick answer on that one, Richie?
Yeah, so like when it comes to just increasing speed, like we've answered this in detail in a previous episode, so I actually will link that above as well. But when it comes to speed, you just want to, first of all, and last time Adrian made a fantastic point of just the mental space you're coming at it from is very, very important. So that's one aspect of it, and then you have the physical aspect of it as well. So of course you want to just get that solid development of first having a good foundation base that you can explode from and have speed from. That's very important. But again, it's not a simple question as in terms of black and white. Hence why people ask it a lot and it comes up time and time again. There needs to be a bit of a system to this, and it's not where something before. For me personally, when I was training for sparring, I would like do exercises at home to increase my speed, use resistance bands, do lots of these things, but you almost need to have a bit of a system and a program for it to be any real benefit. I think that's very, very important. Of course, you can do things that aid your general athletic ability, of course, and that's very, very important. But if you really want to look at increasing your explosive speed and your explosive power, I would actually recommend going to a coach and getting a program that is suited to that. Specific for your sport is very important, because some people you'll go to and they just give you a weights program, which of course is very important to build that foundation. You can't launch a rocket from like an unstable surface, for example, so something that's very explosive must come from a solid base. But then when you look at that in terms of kicking and punching and exploding that way, it needs to eventually develop into a more specific way. So we mentioned specificity. Whoa, that was a tricky one. We mentioned that earlier. So that's very, very important as well here. So just that would be my general advice to people. Like, you can give an answer, but it's really not going to give people any real value, because for me, I think you need to go about it that way.
Sure thing. Yeah, it's leave that one for now. And again, if it keeps coming up, we might have to do something a bit more specific on it, but we'll see how we go. So how to get lighter legs, and I think even the phrasing of that's very interesting. So I think it's a phrase that we've used quite a bit. So
it's definitely something that I've heard around in Ireland, but maybe, well, obviously not every country speaks English as well, but
sure,
it's not really something that I've heard in the more international circuit really, but that whole idea of a lighter leg, just to give people a bit of context, is basically just having your weight almost loaded more on your back leg to keep your front leg lighter, to almost use your front leg like a jab, and to keep it super light, so then you can lift it quickly and maintain distance. So we have a little bit of a clip here to give you an example of what we mean. So you'll see here Luke on the right in the red. He's just keeping his front leg super light, not much weight on it, and then because of that, he can lift it at will almost, and he can really keep his opponent at bay. So you just see he drops and he's up again, and so that's really keeping the front leg light. And I think it's more of a mental shift as opposed to any real drills or specific kind of exercises you need to do. It's just a mental shift, really. I guess keeping your stance relatively shorter is very important in it as well. If you have a big, long stance, obviously it's harder to distribute your weight. So you'll notice people who do this are able to work off that shorter stance most of the time, and just almost keeping the ball of the foot just nice and light, hopping on the ground. And you see there, Luke is very, very good at it. Keeps his opponent guessing, and it's a very, very useful tool to have if you're especially strong off that front leg.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, the principle is almost like the principle behind the L stance of, you want to keep enough weight in your back leg that your front leg is easier to lift, while still being, generally speaking, quite balanced and, able to transition into hands and all the rest of it. But it's a coaching cue you'll hear from the Irish coaches every now and again, where particularly if you've gotten to the point where there is a lead, but the fighter in the ring isn't an edge of the ring fighter, that, if they don't move particularly well at the edge of the ring, you don't want them to be there. You just say, all right, hold the center, front leg light. And it's just a case of, or put up the fence. And it's just a case of making sure that you're in a position, you're in a balanced position, you're not committing forward, and you're able to pick that front leg up as a response to what's coming at you. It's pretty much just that, there's the fence, stay back. A lot of the time. I think Luke gives some very good examples there of using that light front leg and carrying with it and doing things with it. But just as a coaching cue, sometimes you'll hear that, and that's kind of what we're thinking. So here we go. So what is the most realistic combo you can land in sparring? And this is from David Croft, 2006. So everyone loves combos.
True.
I think it's Street Fighter, isn't it?
But when you think of martial arts training and any stereotypical highlight video of training or montage that you see in the movie or whatever, it's just like training combos on a heavy bag or training combos on pads or whatever. And that's traditionally how people see martial arts training or combat sport training. So people become obsessed almost with combos and fancy combos, and then you see this whole thing online of the pad porn and all this, where they're using very fancy combos and the Mayweather stuff, and so it just ends up spiraling out of control, really. But when you think about it, what are the combinations of techniques that really flow well together in ITF and which get a return on the scoreboard? And that's the most important thing for me, is do they get a return on the scoreboard? They might look great and all that, but at the end of the day, it's about getting your scores on the board and winning. So straight off the bat, I think linking hands to a Daliya Chagi or turning kick to the body or to the head is a very simple combination. These combinations don't have to be very fancy, and we see some great examples here from Katja going straight to hands and then trying to get that kick to the body, and there we see it again. So straight off, that's one of the most important ones and the most valuable ones. You'll see that this at every single level, from yellow belt children all the way to the highest level in ITF. But interestingly as well, a nice one here that Katja used is, we mentioned it earlier, of linking an axe kick and a turning kick. I actually think that these really link well together, and there's a nice natural flow between the two techniques.
For sure.
Not that we see often, but it's an interesting one to maybe play with and see if that's for you. But hands and legs, linking them together is a very, very foundational principle of doing well in ITF. If you can link them well together, and if you can get a return on both every time, you're going to be in a great, great position.
It follows some simple principles as well. Like when you look at a combination, if it's going to be effective, it's effective because it follows some principles, and it makes it more difficult for your opponent to get away, to get away from the finish of the combination. So the hands into the turning kick to the body, you're forcing or encouraging your opponent to bring their hands up to protect their head or to punch back, which opens the body for the turning kick. The downward kick tends to, it presents a very real, something has just come up to my face, so the hands come up a little bit and the turning kick to the body follows, very easily. Likewise, when that turning kick to the body lands and you're slightly winded, or you've had to tense down there, your whole body contracts towards the center. It's like, oh, now all of a sudden the blind side shoulder's open. Combinations that work with the natural rhythm of things often work quite nicely. And so there's also the element of setups. So things like where you deliberately kick long with a side kick so that when your opponent, avoids it, they're drawn to come into hands, so you can take the defensive side kick or back kick and escape. There's shots like that. And I think anything that's works in relation to combination works because it plays off of the interaction between two human beings who are both trying to score and win the match. Something that works off the interaction of a contrived set of pad movements doesn't actually, it doesn't stand the same chance of coming off, because it's missing its context. So again, everybody scores combinations when their partner goes back in a straight line. The second anything moves off of that, these combinations become an awful lot more difficult. So you coming at your opponent or going away from your opponent in a straight line, opens up combinations. But it's that you don't need to be super effective at mixing very fancy shots to be effective in sparring. And more is definitely not better in this case. Like in the end, getting the first shot to land is usually the 90% of the work. And after that, what we're looking at is building scores or building momentum from there, and that's almost like a higher order skill. It's reading the match as it's developed.
Exit shots as well.
Yeah,
like we actually touched on that with the back kick as well, didn't we?
Yeah,
the back kick is a lovely exit shot, and what we mean by exit shot is when you're in contact and when you're exchanging techniques, that it's a nice shot to pull you back out of contact to reset again. So having those nice entry and exit shots and then the bits in between, I think is very important. But I really like that idea that you mentioned there of when you go to one, the other might become available. That's obviously when you think about combinations, that's what they all flow off, really. That idea of even like traditional boxing ones of like the straight line versus the circular shot.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Versus the head. Yeah.
Exactly. So just mix and matching those is where your opportunities will come from, really, in terms of combinations.
Yeah, and that's it. We can't defend everywhere. So, that, and sometimes the principle out of that one is you go to Napoleon's one there, which is the best form of defense is a good offense. And it's like, well, if you can't defend everywhere, just attack them. And, so there's a good message in that one too. So we're coming very close to the end of our questions now, and this one is it's a big one. So are there any books for people who want to become trainers in the future? And we didn't give this one too much time because it could go on forever, but I think we have a few. So Richie, we might start off with some of your set there.
Anyway, aren't we? So this should be an easy one for us.
Although, to be honest, like we had the discussion before we started that we're not reading much about coaching right now. And
because
go ahead.
I was just saying the whole idea of direct experience, because a lot of time when I really get delve deep into a particular subject or area, it's because it's like something that has come up in either competition or training, and that's one of the reasons why I really love competition, because it's direct feedback. Like, is this working, is this not working, and how do we adjust and continue to go forward? So that's the best part for me about competition, is that you get that direct feedback to adjust. And so maybe the mental side of your athletes needs to be improved, maybe the cardio aspect wasn't there, maybe your communication with them or whatever. So for me, that's when I really, really get interested in a particular subject. And at the moment, obviously, with coronavirus and training being really hampered at the moment, not having consistent training, that has been something that usually I haven't really been reading up as much lately. Usually Christmas is a great time to get in a nice new book and get in deep into a particular subject, but
Yeah.
just because that direct experience isn't there, it's something that has like dwindled away a bit. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting that back again in 2021. But yeah, anyway, just to get started, I have a couple of books here with me.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that we are about this channel is the whole idea of using practice in a way that's representative, and I think this is a great one that I have started with here. So it's the constraints-led approach by Ian Renshaw. So it's a good one, and touching on ideas as well, like we had earlier of getting creative with kicking. The constraint-led approach is a really interesting idea to get into if you're coaching in any sport. And you really see the benefit from that in terms of the engagement from your students or your athletes, and also the transferable ways that you can bring it from training to performance, and how you can make practice a little bit more representative. So I really highly recommend that one. It's a good one if you're looking down there. I know you have one similar as well, Adrian.
Yeah.
Do you want to that now? We can go back and forth maybe on topics as well. It might be a good one.
Yeah, so let's just say, so there's this one, Perception, Cognition and Decision Training, The Quiet Eye in Action, from Joan Vickers. But so this one, and let me see if I have the this one as well. No, that's Stretching Scientifically. I was looking for a different one as well there. I'll grab that.
Come back to it maybe.
There we go. So Play Practice. So that's another one from Alan Launder. So these ones were, they're quite general and broad, and it takes quite a bit of interpretation to make it relevant to combat sports in particular. But
and that's actually one of the reasons why we started this, isn't it? Because
for sure.
There was no real context to combat or specifically ITF.
Yeah.
All this stuff that it was just theory. And then you have to pull the bits and come up with it yourself. So that was one of the actual inspirations for us coming together on this channel.
Yeah, and I mean, to quickly summarize, perception, cognition, decision training is really around that perception action coupling kind of side of things. So it's basically there's a lot of research in it, but it's looking at what you are actually focusing on is not what you think you're focusing on. And that kind of moves away from the cognitive part of it. You're not thinking your way through a decision as much as you think you are, so much as responding to a program based on the inputs that you've actually picked up. So how do you train to actually tune in on the inputs is part of it. And then the play practice part is around the idea of letting the game be the teacher, and designing the game to deliver an effective lesson. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. So we'll go back over to one of yours.
Yeah. So this is one that I really liked. I got it maybe 2 Christmases ago, I think. So this is Coaching Children in Sport by Paul Kilgannon.
Yeah.
We had Paul on the channel over the summer as well, and he actually put me in a reference in one of his recent books. So we have a nice relationship with Paul at the moment, but this is a fantastic book. It really touches on almost everything you need to know if you're dealing with children. So it touches on the constraint-led approach. So it just touches on everything without going too deep into anything. It just gives you everything you need to know. So it's a really good foundational one if you're working with children, and would highly recommend that one.
Perfect. So I'll talk about this one next as it was sitting there, which is Stretching Scientifically, now an old book by Thomas Kurtz, and it's moved through the editions over the years, but this one almost got me in trouble when I was doing my my 4th year dissertation in sport and exercise science, because a lot of the references and so on, I was basically looking at the use of static stretching as in warm up for strength power sports, and so I was kind of dipping into forbidden territory at the time, back in the early
Renegade.
2000s. A little bit of a renegade thing at the time, yeah. So static stretching was safe, was king, was the way you improved your flexibility. And here was like, you know, massive evidence that was looking at, yeah, but there's other ways too, and some of them are more effective over time. And, you know, there's also the element in this, he talks an awful lot about using dynamic mobility in the warm-up and making the type of mobility training that you're doing in your warm-up more representative of the activity that's going to follow it and all that kind of thing. But it's still, for me, a really good read, and you can ignore the 1980s picture on the front. You know, in the end, the content is still pretty damn good, and it basically, like, to summarize it, it's looking an awful lot into isometrics and PNF, and you know, active stretching, and you know, it's it really was the first time that I looked at something that I suppose really talked about training the nervous system in order to improve your flexibility, more so than training the muscles, ligaments and tendons. So yeah, it was quite an eye-opener for me when I hit that one first.
Like all these books as well that we touch on, it's all about the big message overall. It's not the really the small things you'll take away, but like the big overarching theme, I guess, is the real. But we actually had a chat about this before we recorded, as well as talking about that. Putting it into action is the most important thing as well. You can read whatever you want, as much as you want, but taking the actionable bits away from each book and putting them into practice in your coaching is one of the most important pieces. And one of the places really that most people fall behind, where, oh, that's a fantastic idea, but then they never apply it and get the benefit from it.
Yeah, lived experience is more important, for sure. So what's next on your list?
I have this one. Is a good one, coaching athletes, wrong way, to be their best. So this is actually a good one on communication and how to really, as it says, get the best out of your athletes through just like how you approach conversation and communication with them. And almost the whole premise of this really is to put the ball in their court to take the action they want to take. So you can like tell people and lecture people until the cows come home, but by using communication in a more effective way, you can actually draw what they want to achieve out of it a little bit more. It's a very, very interesting concept, and it's a good one in terms of just overall communication of how to deal with athletes. And I think that it's something that, like, we all talk about, like drills and exercises and all that, but it's this stuff behind the scenes that is the most important part, really, you know.
Especially if you've only got those 2, 3, 4 hours of the week where you're actually in physical contact doing the training sessions. You know, what you do outside of that can be super important, and that's one that I'll have to put on my list because I haven't read that one yet either. So that's a good one. I'm going to jump right back to like brass tacks basics, because on the question itself, which was kind of looking at you know, if you're starting off in coaching, and this is you know, it's used a lot in the US. We use it in Ireland in some of our coach education programs as well. It's like, not everything in there is going to be perfect for you, but there is a very good grounding in, like, kind of expanding your mind in terms of, well, what is coaching? And like you said, it goes from everything from the communication, how you misconceive communication to be and how you think it works versus how it actually works. There's a little bit about you know, different coaching methodologies and constraints led versus, was a traditional drills based or whatever. There's bits about coaching styles. There's elements of it in terms of like nutrition and conditioning. You know, it's kind of a primer. So as if you've read nothing else, it's a great place to start, because it gives you more questions to answer and more places to go to answer those questions. So I still think, you know, for someone who's kicking off in coaching,
is that one a little bit more like layman's terms?
Absolutely. It is super approachable. Like, it's designed for people who've never coached before to pick it up and have a go at, well, what is this thing I'm getting into? It assumes you have some knowledge of sport that you know, but it doesn't assume you have any other prior knowledge, and it's very broad. It's textbooky in that respect. Like, it's very, very, very broad. It's not on any particular topic. I
actually have a very similar one as well, but on the flip side,
right?
It's almost like so that one will be maybe the one that your book will be my version, and then this one will be Adrian's version.
Right.
So this is The Art of Sports Science by Dr. Fergus Connolly. Really heavy in terms of like the science behind it. So like, there's some things that just go over my head even like when I'm reading them, but like when you go through them, it touches on everything. So everything from, like we talked earlier on, anaerobic, aerobic capacity, and really goes into the science behind it all. But then as well, there's very valuable takeaways. So it's almost like, I would call it like the Bible of sports science. So it's like, it has everything you can think of. If you just go into that, you'll find it. So it's a really good one. Would recommend it, but as I said, a little bit heavy if you kind of don't have a bit of a background in this stuff already.
Yeah.
So maybe not the best place to start, but very good reference, and I like to just reference off anything like that. As I said, if you're in like a tournament or whatever, and you say you come up with a problem and you're looking to, how do I approach this? It's a good place to go for any topic on sports science.
Yeah, super. And again, like there are plenty, and where they really are deep and painful reads is the only way that you could put it across. But like some kind of simpler ones, Jerry Lynch, Creative Coaching, a very easy one to get into, to read through, and it really is more about setting a coaching philosophy and connecting better with your athletes. Then you have introduction to sports coaching, and this is Robin Jones and Kieran Knight, Kingston. But again, good places to start. And I think in terms of the question that was asked, really, really good place to start. And just as it comes up, and it's been one over and over again, this one by Joel Jameson, The Ultimate MMA Conditioning, has been a book that's come up in many circles, and we've certainly read into it. You still have to bear in mind that you're training in Taekwondo and not MMA, but a lot of the principles that underlie the conditioning programs in there and the discussions in there are incredibly relevant, because it is a fight sport, and because the principles that are being applied are the same principles that we'd apply, but we're looking, rather than getting 3 to 5 5-minute rounds, which is a mix of stand-up and grappling, we're looking at 2x2. And the other big difference for us, of course, is MMA are building towards one fight, and we're building towards a day of multiple events. So there are differences, but as long as you're aware of the differences, it's a good place, and it's not super science heavy. It's manageable for most, I think.
That's one good thing about the popularization of MMA, I guess, in the last maybe 10 years, isn't it? That it has pushed things forward there. There's more information there for people than there ever been. I imagine when you were starting off on this stuff, it was much harder to find anything relevant to martial arts, was it? You're
basically talking about boxing, a limited amount of judo or fencing or something like that, and but boxing was the main one that was considered. A lot of the early research I did was on stuff like lightweight rowing, believe it or not, there's an American football by weight category. So there's a different version of American football that's played with weight restrictions, or so it works a bit different as well. And so there was things that I was looking at for speed, power versus endurance for the weight category sport, but like everything can be so much more specific now, because WT being in the Olympics as well has had a huge impact. There's a lot more research there. Karate being now an Olympic sport, there's a lot more research there. Kickboxing, it's starting to evolve. MMA has been huge, so there's a lot more out there for us, and a lot more specifically, programs and information being specifically produced for our audience. I think it's great.
Yeah. Before we spend any more time on this, just a quick one. I'll just give you the name of it. This is a good one, Tipping the Balance. Fantastic book on the mental side, and we've taken a lot of information off that to almost as foundational topics for other things that we've been working on. So really, really good book. I would highly recommend that. And also a podcast, which we are big fans of, is The Talent Equation. So that's a great place to start if you're looking to get into this more transferable way of thinking with the constraint-led approach and the game, play, practice, all of this stuff. So I would check that out as well. It's a good one if you can't read, in terms of, not if you can't read, well, if you can't read as well, fair enough, but I mean in terms of just easy listening on a drive or on a walk or whatever, it's just handy. So The Talent Equation, check that out.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's definitely, however you get the information in is good. So a slightly simpler one here from Andrea Pascal. Any resources to help with learning the terminology, especially the Korean? And kind of want to answer this, almost in multiple ways, because while, that's a challenge for, I think, for everybody, initially. So this is, would say, our training manual, the ITA training manual. Every student can have access to this, and each grade, and I think the question was a blue belt, each grade has, like, the terminology listed, the English, the Korean, how it's going to apply or turn up in the as you experience it. So I think that's your first step. Now we are working towards making an accessible version of this manual, hopefully in the next, this is a 2021 project, but that'll be available, hopefully, iPad, iPhone. We don't know yet how we're going to do it for Android, so there's potential there for a web app. But the idea being that, you will be able to click on a technique, you get the video, you get the Korean and the English terminology, you get it in spoken word, so it makes it a little bit easier to learn. But the biggest thing I would say for any student coming through trying to learn our terminology is remember that we're not learning the language of Korean. We're learning just a few phrases and things. So you want to break it down into ways that are memorable to you. So remember hand parts and foot parts. Remember directions like upward, downward, inward, outward. Remember levels, heights and levels, and remember them on their own. And then all we're actually doing, rather than actually speaking Korean and using these in the most grammatically correct way, we're taking those words and wedging them together. So we have a tool, a height, a manner of delivery, and it's called a block. So, for example, a reverse knife hand outward middle block becomes Sangkal-dong, so it's the tool. Outward bakuro, Kayonde is middle, and block is maki. So we put it all together, Sangkal-dong, bakuro, Kayonde, maki. And because it's done that way, it's very, very logical that over time, once you start, there are a limited number of tools in the hand, a limited number of tools in the foot. There is a limited number of directions we can move, heights and levels we can finish at, and stances and so on. It's all quite limited, and they repeat over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And if the person's a blue belt, probably they've just encountered Jungun and the absolute waterfall of new movements that land on top of you, and it can feel hard at that grade. And after that, it does get easier, so don't panic, I think is the biggest one there.
Most of the time as well, people will have an idea of what movements will be asked on the test.
Yeah.
So like if you're really, really struggling, maybe just like, as you said, like get one word that really sticks out to you for each one. So I don't know, maybe like for blue belt, like Sambarak or something like that. And you just say, okay, well, I know that's going to be using the palm. So then it just gives you a little bit of a reference if you're really, really struggling and well, like you should be able to repeat these movements and just use the words with them. So if you can get somebody to call them out and to just go through the movements, it becomes really second nature after a while.
Very true, very true. But it's quite relevant, something that we all have to go through over time as well. So this one is our last one for today. So it's how do I overcome the fear of hitting my partner in sparring? And it's the reverse of the question that we usually get, which is the how do I overcome the fear of being hit in sparring? But relevant, and it's one that we do come across a lot, particularly with teenage girls. For me, is the big one where I come across this one.
What's your approach with that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one because it often presents as it's in the I'm not sure, I don't want to spar, I don't want to compete anymore, and then you get into the whole reasoning of it and the questioning of why that is and what's worrying you, and it comes like, well, I don't want to hit someone else, I don't want to hurt anybody, and it's generally where you're in a very confused place where you're more worried about the damage that you could do to somebody than what might happen to yourself. Very often you kind of jump to the conclusion that no, you're just afraid of sparring, but it's not always that as well. So, but the first thing is, I just think that there's a breakdown there in the relationship between your. Generally, it's at the point where you're thinking of this as a fight rather than a game. And like, I'm not worried about hurting somebody if we go, would say, for example, playing airsoft.
Yeah.
I'm just going to shoot you and it's fine, and you shoot me and it's fine, and it's a game, and like, it's going to hurt more than sparring in a lot of cases as well, but again, it's fine. And I think really you're struggling to find your connection to the game, and it's not thinking about hitting or beating up somebody else, it's thinking about scoring points. And I think if you still enjoy the sport and if you enjoy sparring as an activity, but you're struggling with that as a concept, I think you need to just reconnect to the game part of it, and you need to make your practice more playful, and you maybe need to explore a sparring style that's more playful or more counter fighting based, and maybe, you know, it isn't in your nature to go and select a more aggressive sparring style. You need to maybe select a sparring style that allows you to be yourself, and that allows you to explore you know, sparring as a game, as a contest, about you trying to outsmart your opponent or outwit your opponent in the match. And as I said, for me, that mindset more naturally leads to a more defensive, more counter style of sparring. And, you know, I think that can still be successful. And I think that's still fine. And I think you just have to find you know, rather than trying to change the mindset to make it okay to want to hurt someone else, you change the mindset, you rather adjust the mindset to where it's like, my goal here is to score 2 points, 3 points, 1 point, is to stop them from scoring a point against me. And when you can change that mindset to something that's productive in all circumstances, rather than something that's against what you want in everyday life from someone, but is productive in this particular circumstance, I think that's probably easier to settle in on as well.
Yeah, and I think because, like, when I see this question, I think, okay, maybe you need a bit more of a challenge and to go against opponents that will, or training partners that will push you a bit more. But then, what if you don't have them? What if you're the highest grade, the eldest in your club or whatever? You don't have that opportunity. That's a fantastic way to go about it as well. That mentality of how can I challenge myself? Like you said, maybe try winning with just your bad leg or whatever, and it will push you forward then as well. But that's a great point, I think, of bringing it back to the game and just trying to play it just like outsmart your opponent, and how can I almost like concede no scores against me and do this XYZ to have a successful outcome. So I think that's a great way to approach it, and to still really to push yourself forward in terms of your skill development. And I think it will be much more enjoyable for you as well. It's like what we said earlier, like that is the constraint-led approach in sparring. It's you're constraining yourself to maybe just use your weaker leg, just use spinning techniques, whatever. But the challenge of that would push you forward, and a byproduct of that is just becomes more engaging then as well. It's just more enjoyable, and I think that will definitely have a switch on the mindset there as well.
Yeah, so hopefully that one helps. And that one was actually our last question for day 1, 2021. There's plenty of room in the year for more questions, and as we face into lockdown number 3, we will definitely have plenty more content for people over the coming weeks. So do please hit that bell button and get notified every time we go live, because we can be 100% sure at this stage we're going to have a lot of episodes for you over the next while.
Yeah, and of course as well, pushing into a new year, it'd be cool to maybe come up with some new ideas as well.
Yeah.
So drop them in the comments, send us a message, wherever is easiest for you, and give us some ideas of the things that you'd like to see and that would really help you in this new year, especially if people are going to be doing a lot of like brain gains and studying and stuff on the sport. That would be cool to help there as well. And be sure to get involved as well in terms of our social media. So we have things going almost daily there on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And so check those places out if you're looking for a bit more frequent content. And yeah, have a great new year, everybody. Happy New Year. It's the first of a new year, so have a good one. Hopefully it's a little bit more active than 2020 for most people. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Excellent.